All stories on this channel are original content, fully protected by copyright and intellectual property laws. Any unauthorized copying, re-uploading, narration, or use of these stories will be considered copyright infringement and may lead to serious legal consequences. These stories are exclusively owned by this channel. Respect the rights or face legal action. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Alex R., and I wanted to share it on the channel. My parents own a small shop in our town. It's nothing special, just a simple grocery store selling everyday items and local food. They've been running it for over 20 years, and my dad takes it very seriously, keeping the store open until midnight almost every night, sometimes even later. When I turned 16, I started helping out a few hours a week. By 18, I was working full-time, while taking online college courses. One night, my dad had the day off, and my mom wasn't feeling well, so I was closing the store alone. The last few hours are usually quiet, and that night was no different. Around 9, hardly anyone came in. After only 1 or 2 customers, I decided to grab a sandwich from the fridge and take a quick break. Of course, right as I started eating, someone walked in. I set the sandwich aside and returned to the front counter, waiting for the customer to finish shopping. I pulled out my phone, but after a couple of minutes, I looked up and didn't see anyone. I scanned the store, thinking maybe they were just in an aisle I couldn't see, but still, nothing. After a few more minutes of silence, I began to feel uneasy. I stepped out from behind the counter and started walking through the aisles. It didn't take long to find him. In the second aisle, a man was crouched down at the far end, staring at the floor. He wasn't moving or making a sound. "Sir?" I called out. The man immediately looked up, then stood and locked eyes with me. His eyes were wide and unblinking, full but empty at the same time in a way that made my stomach drop. After a few seconds, he turned and quickly walked out of the store, without saying a single word. Once he left, I checked the spot where he'd been crouching, expecting to find something, anything, but there was nothing there, just empty floor tiles. The whole thing gave me a chill. I went to the front door to make sure he was really gone. It was dark outside, and I couldn't see him anywhere. I went back behind the counter, trying to shake off the weird feeling. 3 hours passed without another customer. It was finally closing time, and I was ready to go home. I locked the front door, grabbed my bag, and started walking toward the back exit. That's when a deafening bang echoed through the store. I froze. The sound came from the back, loud enough to rattle the shelves. My heart started racing as I slowly peeked around the corner toward the back hallway. Dust filled the air. The metal door was hanging open. And there he was. The same man from earlier stood straight at me in those same wide, lifeless eyes. For a moment, I couldn't move. He didn't look angry, just empty and motionless. But the fact that he had forced his way inside said everything I needed to know. I took a few cautious steps backward, then turned and sprinted toward the front. I burst through the door, ran across the street, and called 911. Then I called my dad. When he arrived, the police were already searching the store, but the man was gone. They found a sledgehammer on the ground behind the store, but nothing was missing or broken, aside from the door he forced open. No one ever saw him again. To this day, I don't know what he wanted. Maybe he was just unstable, or maybe he had a plan that I thankfully never got to find out. Thank you to Alex R. for sending this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in, and it might be featured next. This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Emily S., and I wanted to share it on the channel. I work as a receptionist at a popular hotel chain in the US, and for the better part of a year, I've been working the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's not an easy schedule, but I've gotten used to it. This particular night, it was pouring rain outside. The parking lot was empty, and, according to the schedule, there were no new check-ins expected. On nights like this, my job is usually simple. Stay awake, answer phone calls, and help guests with room service or checkouts. The lobby was quiet, except for the steady sound of rain against the windows. I sat behind the front desk with a cup of coffee, trying to fight off the usual wave of tiredness that hits around 1 a.m. That's when the phone rang. I answered, but before I could even say my greeting, a man's voice quickly asked, "Are you still accepting walk-ins?" His voice was muffled, and there was loud static or background noise behind him. I said, "Yes, we have rooms available tonight." He responded, but I couldn't understand him. As I asked him to repeat himself, I glanced up and froze. Outside, through the heavy rain, I saw the faint glow of a cell phone screen. Someone was standing just outside the front window, holding the phone up to their ear. It was him. The man who had just called me was standing right outside in the rain, so close to the glass that I could almost see his face in the dim light. I felt a chill crawl down my neck. I wanted to wave or gesture that I saw him, but something about the situation felt wrong, so I pretended not to notice. A few seconds later, I saw the phone's light turn off. The figure shifted, then started walking toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and he stepped inside, dragging puddles of rainwater across the lobby floor. His clothes were soaked, and his hair dripped as he approached the counter. His expression was blank, completely drained of life. He asked for a room in a flat, almost emotionless tone. I nodded, forcing a polite smile, and began checking the system for an available room. "How would you like to pay for it?" I asked. He slowly pulled a debit card from his pocket and handed it to me. I swiped it, declined. I looked up to tell him, but when I did, he was just staring at me. I said quietly, "It didn't go through. Do you have another card to try?" No response, no movement, just that blank, unblinking stare. The air in the room felt heavy. I could hear the rain pounding outside, but he didn't move or speak, just stood there. I finally placed the card back on the desk and slid it toward him. He didn't even look at it. Instead, he turned and began walking down the hallway toward the guest rooms. That's when my gut told me something was seriously wrong. I pressed the silent emergency button under the counter that automatically calls the police, then cautiously followed him down the hall. He was standing outside one of the rooms, pounding on the door and yelling for someone to open up. His voice was harsh, desperate, and filled with rage. I called out for him to stop, but I didn't dare get too close. Then I saw him reach into his pocket and pull out a knife. He started prying at the door handle with it, trying to force his way in. My heart dropped. I shouted that the police were on their way, but he spun around, glaring at me with an expression I'll never forget. His face twisted in anger as he screamed, "Open the door for me!" and started walking toward me. I didn't wait another second. I turned and ran straight out of the hotel and into the pouring rain, sprinting across the parking lot. Through the glass doors, I could see him go back to the same room, still pounding and shouting. The police arrived within minutes. They entered the building and confronted him before he could break in. Somehow, they convinced him to drop the knife. The woman inside the room,
A young guest came out shaking and crying. She told the officers that the man was her ex-boyfriend. She hadn't seen or spoken to him in over 10 years. How he found her, how he knew exactly which hotel she was staying at, and even what room she was in, nobody knows. The police suspect he had been following her for some time. The thought of what could have happened if I hadn't pressed that alarm button still makes me shiver. Thank you to Emily S. for sending this terrifying story. If you have a story, send it in and it might be featured next.
This story was sent to me by one of my subscribers, Jordan M., and I wanted to share it on the channel. I work as a warehouse employee for a small business in my city. I've had my share of jobs over the years, and this one wasn't really a career, just something to keep me going. My job was simple: unload pallets from the nightly shipments and organize everything in its proper place. Most nights were quiet. The warehouse wasn't very big, and I usually worked alone. Occasionally, someone else would come in during the holidays, but this night was just a regular shift. I clocked in at 10 p.m., counted the stock, put my headphones in, and started unloading boxes. Everything was normal until around midnight, or maybe closer to 1 a.m., when I suddenly heard a knock echo through the building. I paused my music and took out my earbuds, listening carefully. Nothing. The warehouse was old, and it wasn't unusual to hear creaks or groans when the wind picked up outside. Still, this sounded different. It sounded like knocking, distinct and deliberate. I walked to the back of the building, then to the front, checking for anything unusual. Nothing. The parking lot outside was empty, the night still and quiet. I locked the front door again, convinced I'd probably just imagined it, and went back to work. For a while, everything was silent again. But about 20 minutes later, I heard another sound. This time, a single heavy thump coming from the front of the warehouse. I froze for a second, then quickly walked toward the noise. Again, the front area was empty. No one was there and nothing seemed out of place. But unlike before, I knew I hadn't imagined that sound. It was real. Standing there in the quiet, I got this awful gut feeling. It wasn't panic, just that deep instinct that something was wrong. I walked slowly toward the front door and leaned against it to peer through the glass. The moment I pressed on the door, it swung open. I stumbled forward, startled. It was unlocked, but that didn't make sense. I had just locked it 30 minutes ago. I looked down and saw the metal latch lying broken on the ground. My chest tightened. My heart started pounding as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Faint. Echoing from the hallway behind me. I didn't think twice. I bolted through the open door into the parking lot, running until I was a safe distance away. My hands were shaking as I turned back toward the building. Through the glass door, I saw movement. A figure appeared inside the warehouse, standing near the entrance. They moved slightly, as if looking out at me, watching me. Then they turned and disappeared into the shadows. I immediately called the police and waited outside until they arrived. When the officers searched the warehouse, they found that the intruder had escaped through the back door. A few items were reported missing, but it wasn't clear if they were stolen or just miscounted inventory. The latch had clearly been broken with some kind of tool. What unnerved me most was realizing that whoever it was had propped the door to look closed, hiding the break so I wouldn't notice. If I hadn't leaned against it, if I hadn't checked, I might have walked right into them. Maybe it was just a break-in, maybe it was random,
But the thought that someone could have been waiting in the dark, knowing I was alone, still makes my skin crawl. I quit that job not long after. I don't know who that person was or what they wanted, but I hope I never see them again.